Now, pensioners are to get a rise in line with inflation, which is expected to soar above 10% in the coming months, even though ministers have warned workers they can't expect wage increases which keep pace with rising prices, warning this will only fuel the inflationary cycle. So are the older generation once again getting more help than younger workers, including, of course, many graduates are facing rapidly rising interest rates on their student loans? Where does this leave generational inequality? Well, the Conservative peer Lord Willits is president of the Resolution Foundation's Advisory Council and Intergenerational Centre. He wrote a book, The Pinch, Have the Old Stolen the Future of the Young, and is writing about a gerontocracy in today's Sunday Times. He joins us now. Lord Willits, good morning. Good afternoon, I should say. Hello.
Hi, good afternoon. Hello.
Also joining us is Georgia Gilholy, a speaker for the organisation Young Voices. Good afternoon, Georgia.
Hi, Carol. Great to be here.
Good to have you with us. David Willits, let me ask you, first of all, you're writing about this in the Sunday Times today. Are you concerned that this offer of a big rise for pensioners when wage restraint is being urged on other generations is just increasing that generational inequality?
I think it's right to offer pensioners inflation protection, which is what this 10% like next April would be. What I think is wrong is to bring back the full-blown triple lock, because that is a racket where pensions go up by either prices or earnings or 2.5%, whichever is the highest. And so it means that pensioners are seeing their incomes rising over time by more than the rest. And that's not fair. And I think even many pensioners want their children and grandchildren to have a fair deal. At the moment, the British government, the British shifting to be a state essential pensioners through their benefits and the healthcare that they require.
And Georgia Gilholy, when you look at that increase for pensioners, something that's not available to many people of your generation, what do you make of that?
Yeah, I think it's very unfortunate. I think it kind of shows the double standard with the government in terms of sort of rising wages. We have the government quite viciously hitting back at trade unions this week who are striking, on the rail services, saying that if they have certain wage hikes, they're going to contribute to an inflationary spiral, etc., and yet they're allowing pensions to go up.
I'm going to bring in Lucy in this conversation.
David, I was fascinated to read in your Sunday Times piece today just so many eye-watering statistics. One that really caught my eye was that benefit changes since 2010 have cut the incomes of working households with children by an average of £375 per year, yet pensioners have enjoyed an average gain of £510 per year during the same period. You come up with one solution to help the younger generation of trying to get them on the housing ladder, which obviously needs to be a boost to supply to do that. Do you have any faith in this Conservative government that they are going to get round to building more houses or deregulating the mortgage market as they've promised?
I think attitudes are shifting on this. And look, democratically elected politicians, and I'm now commenting from the safety of the unelected House of Lords, but my old friends and colleagues who have to fight the electorate, and win over the electorate, they say to me quite often, we agree with your analysis, David, but we couldn't win any votes with this. But if you look at attitude to house building, I think it's encouraging. In the old days, only 25% of people agreed more housing be built in my area, which is the question. Now that's up to 50%. And I found when I was an MP in fighting elections, the only argument that I could that actually won over the NIMBYs objecting to housing development was to say, look, I know the houses where you are. You're living in houses that were built in the 1960s and 70s for your generation when you were young. We have a similar obligation to allow more houses to be built for your children and grandchildren so that they have the same start in life. I think that is a winnable argument. And when it's won, and I think it's being won, we will see more houses being built.
David, we've got a bit of a problem on your line. We're going to try and establish a better connection. Let me bring in Georgia Gilholy, do you think that there is a concern here that it's all to do with voter power, that the Conservatives look at the fact that a lot of those who do traditionally vote Conservative are from the older generation? They've written your generation off as a bunch of lefties, and they're not prepared to do enough to help you.
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, so we saw Boris Johnson give some quite lukewarm housing policies a few weeks ago, and this was supposed to be, his big relaunch of his premiership after the disastrous no confidence vote. And it was very lukewarm. And I think that if the Conservatives haven't got through planning reform yet, it's not going to happen anytime soon. So unfortunately, prices are going to keep rising. Young people are going to be priced out unless they inherit property. And it's very unfortunate. And I think that there's going to be a drop-off, of course, more in young people voting Conservative. So it's bad for the party in the long run. I think sort of their idea is that there's lots of, as you were saying, Tory MPs in seats where there are older people, don't, want things built at the bottom of their road or whatever. And the idea of, obviously, the previous sort of the policy that's ongoing, the idea that people are going to vote, whether to build houses in their community. Well, lots of those places that might need more houses, they're obviously just not going to vote to build more houses. And lots of the people who are involved in those decisions won't live to see the long-term consequences, which are going to be dire, unfortunately, for my generation and beyond.
And even some of those very aspirational younger workers who are earning enough, for example, to start having to pay back their student loans are seeing the cost of those loans increasing and the amount they owe still increasing as well.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, we're looking going forward with the current tax hikes. There's basically going to be about a 50% tax rate on young graduates, which is very difficult when you're trying to start out. Of course, we need to have sensible fiscal policy, but the government themselves have been responsible for mismanaging businesses during COVID. They're responsible for wasting billions on PPE, etc. This is a situation that they sort of back themselves into. So blaming it on young people for going to university or, buying avocados, whatever they want to say, that's not the way forward. And you're not going to attract more Tory voters if that's the approach, which unfortunately is the approach of a lot of MPs who like to sort of mouth off about these things, or be contentious rather.
Georgia, another aspect that David highlighted in his piece this morning was that younger people's earnings are stagnating. A 30-year-old today earns no more than a 30-year-old did 10 or 15 years ago, partly because young people are more concentrated in lower paid occupations. How can we get more people into higher paid occupations?
It's very difficult because when it comes to training, I think the government sort of has a bit of a haphazard approach. They're trying to invest in more technical skills, but then the sort of in schools, my experience is the idea is sort of funneling people into universities without necessarily knowing what the outcome is going to be. And there's actually quite a snobbish approach when it comes to the trades, let's say, plumbing, building, etc., when there's actually realistically, for a lot of people, there's more money to be made doing that for the people who have those kind of skills. Don't think I'd be very good at it myself, but those kind of skills, people sort of want to sit in an office, which isn't necessarily always the best thing for their income.
David, I'm sorry to interrupt you, Georgia. Before we have to go, David, you're a Conservative peer. Do you share the views of some of the Tory grandees and indeed Tim Lawton on this programme, saying that it's time for other senior members of the Cabinet to confront the Prime Minister and tell him it's time to resign?
I think that, look, I'm not on the front line of politics anymore, and he just had a no confidence vote, which he won. So what I'm interested in, and the reason why I'm writing about all this in the Sunday Times, is I actually think the underlying issues about the future of the party are to do with attracting younger voters. And they're not, young people aren't a bunch of Marxists plotting revolution. They're people who would like to own their own home and have a decent job. They have absolutely classic aspirations, and we Conservatives should be trying to deliver them rather than make life harder for them.
Lord Willett and Georgia Gilholy, thank you both so much for joining us this morning.